Oh, yeah.
So you got
Yes.
one.
Okay.
Pretty good though. I like it.
I just didn't know how to
Or
respond.
hold on to that. Can't have it. I'm jealous.
Now there's three of us.
That's right.
Did you hear what I said to him?
Are you leaving?
My funnel meter is at the top.
You're not gonna harass us? Why?
My funnel meter is.
Wow. Well, have a good afternoon, Mr. Kenyon.
Oh, nice to see you, Mike. Okay, good morning. My name is Chris Caius. I'm the chairman of the Kane County Administration Committee, and I'm calling this meeting to order on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023 at 10:20 a.m.
Berman,
Here.
Roll call, please.
Davis,
Here.
Ford. Gums,
Gums here.
Young,
Young here.
Juby,
Over here.
Caius,
Caius present.
Dumpy here.
Pura. Give quorum.
Back of the coffee machine. Okay, may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from November 9th, 2022 and January 11th, 2023. Moved by Berman, second by
Have a second.
Davist. Are there any corrections, modifications? Hearing none? Seeing none? Roll call, please.
Berman, yes.
Ford. Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Passes.
Item 3, financial report. The monthly finance reports are attached.
Okay.
Is there any other, number 4, public comment? Any public comment?
Could I respond to the finance?
Certainly.
Thank you. I would like to,
Madam Chairman, go ahead.
thank you, sir. I would like to remind you as committee chair to take a look at your IT and building management budget as per the request yesterday. You may want to ask a couple of your committee members who would like to voluntarily delve into it to make recommendation, but it's absolutely to your determination how you're going to proceed. But just as a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any public, on item 4 again, public comment, anybody online? In person, nothing written? And then item 5, the executive director's report. I'll turn this over to Mr. Roger Fonstock, our executive director.
Good morning. This is Roger Fonstock. For the sake of time this morning, we have Jason Dwyer from White and Company here. And we are asking Jason to do his presentation for the Space Needs Assessment Report, and then also a brief discussion about capital projects that White and Company's been working on with us. So for the sake of this meeting, we're going to defer our time that we'd normally take to discuss the financials that are in your packet and give more time to the Space Needs Report for White and Company. So Jason Dwyer is at the podium, and I'll turn it over to Jason. And Blair, can you cue up the presentation for Jason?
Welcome, Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you. Good to be here. So again, Jason Dwyer with White and Company. I think, there's a number of folks on the board here that this will be a little bit of a repeat. We gave an update presentation back in October of last year, focusing on the space needs assessment, a little bit of a status update, kind of where we were at. At that time, we were still collecting a little bit of feedback from some of the different departments. So kind of what I'm going to present today is a final report. One other sort of interesting detail I'll talk about, I think it might have been actually a day or two before or after we presented in October that CMAP published revised population projection data. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means. That's a piece of the puzzle in terms of assessing space needs. So at this point, we've been able to bring in that new data, make some adjustments to projections. So we're now using the most current CMAP population projections. So I guess going back a little bit, we, we've been working on doing a space needs and conditions assessment for all county departments and facilities. So this is kind of a high level overview on the screen now about the different tasks that were involved in each of those activities. So for the space needs analysis, we used data collection tools for the different groups, questionnaire format that talked a lot about kind of what are the operational conditions, what kind of deficiencies might there be. So a lot of the work was through a data collection tool and then direct interviews of all the different department heads and elected officials and or their representatives. Then from there, we did assessments and projections for staffing and for space needs for each of the groups, identifying kind of what the key issues were and findings. So this is just a series of the steps we went through. And then you can see in the blue there at the bottom, the most recent task we've completed is updating the space needs based on the CMAP revised population data. So that's the space needs analysis. That really focuses a lot on each individual department and what's going on in the department, what they see for the future, what kind of things might drive changes in types of space and amount of space. Then the other part of the assignment here is an analysis of physical conditions for each of the different buildings where the departments reside. So as we walk through meeting with the different groups, we assessed the conditions of the space and then did a little deeper dive in a number of the areas as well. So we did different levels of assessment based on the types of facilities. A lot of that was geared toward trying to determine which facilities that the county currently owns are the primary or best assets and are worthy of continued significant maintenance investment for long-term usability, and then identification of assets, building assets or property assets that are quite a bit more challenged, maybe aren't the best places to continue investing money and maybe should be considered for alternative uses. So that's kind of the high level summary of what we've been working on, what the culmination of these efforts are. Okay, so just a quick recap. These are the different groups and departments. We break it down really into what we call judicial and public safety groups and then county government departments. There's a handful of departments like a Division of Transportation that we did not look at as part of the study. It's, I'll say, all more of your core county government functions and then really all of the judicial public safety groups there that were included in the assessment.
Could you speak up a little bit? You're fading.
Sure. Probably getting too far away from the microphone.
Lean right in there. Lean in.
I think it's
Hard to sleep.
Is that better?
There you
Okay.
go.
I guess I gotta stay close to the mic.
Yeah.
You're on American Idol. You're right up there.
Right. So I think everybody on the committee here was emailed a copy of the report. I brought a couple printed copies. We didn't want to print dozens of them. It's a lot of paper, but this is what the report looks like. I just have a snapshot on the screen of what the what the report cover looks like. And I want to just touch for a minute on the table of contents. We have it divided into a number of sections. Demographics is one of the key things. I talked about that relative to population projections and other issues. We have a summary in here of the existing building physical conditions components that kind of gives you a high level overview of the quality of the assets and what are the key issues in play. Section 4 has a whole assessment on space methodology. So we use kind of standard planning principles for square foot per person for offices and specialty spaces. So that's really kind of the focus of how we derive the space projections and how do we try to provide consistency or normalizing of the space across multiple departments. What we find a lot of times with counties and Kane is no different, that there's a lot of maybe inconsistency or just different sizes of spaces and that because of the different types of buildings or what's sort of transpired over the many years. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but when we do a study like this, we try to look at it in sort of preferred terms and consistency across groups and then account for special requirements of different departments. Like the courts, for example, they may have specific requirements or sort of standards for square footage per office for people, but then obviously there's specialty spaces, courtrooms and the like that have their own unique characteristics. And that's true of every department. And then sections 5 and 6 really dive deep into the details of each individual department on the county government side and the judicial side. And section 7, just some considerations and thoughts for the future, which I'll talk about at the end. So this is the population assessment that we had initially when I presented in October. This was from the CMAP published data from 10 October 2018. But what we've done now is collected the most recent 12 October 2022 data that was published by CMAP, and that's in the red bars there on the screen. You can see that in terms of total population projection, it's significantly less than what was previously projected at the year 2050. And that's sort of consistent and incremental from year to year in 5-year increments. So, and not that this is a perfect assessment of what it's going to be, but we're always trying to use, your authorities' published data for population as a guide for some of the space needs planning. Now, population on its own is not the only factor. On the right side, I've identified a couple other things. We talked to each group about, workload indicators, what types of things are going on or changing in the group. Obviously, things like legislative changes can have a big impact on staffing and space needs, things that come up over time. Funding has an impact, use of technology. So a host of different things we analyzed as we looked at the space needs, with population just being one of the factors, but an important one that we wanted to make sure that we were using the most current data on. I just figured I'd give you a snapshot. For each department, we have a 4-page profile. Some of this is just to collect basic information. We always like to take some pictures to have a sense of what the spaces look like, what kind of configurations we have. So that's on the left side. On the right side, we have a rundown of kind of what the operations and what the core functions of the department are. In each case, we identify what the existing space allocations are in each of the buildings. That's used to kind of identify current condition state so that we can, do an assessment from, what's current and what is preferred for the future. Then on the 3rd and 4th pages of each department profile is when we start to get into some projections on future staffing and future space needs. And I'll say that, the staffing, it's not a hiring model. This isn't, a recommendation on what the hiring practices should be, but we need an assessment based on various metrics to determine what we think the staffing is, because staffing has a direct translation to square footage of space needed to house staff is one element. So that's what's on the left side. And the different factors I talked about, population, historical percent change, department recommendations, all those things factor into different metrics to assess a future projection for staffing. Then on the right side, we use some of the space needs methodology from section 4 of the report to identify square foot per person for the staffing count, and then factor in unique spaces or other types of spaces to come up with a total projection on square footage. One thing I'll say with this is a little bit confusing. We use different terminology on the types of square footage. So net square footage in general is space that would be within 4 walls of a room or an office. A big term that we use a lot in this report is what we call department gross square footage. So if you think about a department as a suite of spaces of offices and storage rooms and that, it'd be the whole of the space necessary to support that individual department. Then the next step with that is what we'd call building gross square footage. And why all the data we look at in the report is really tied to department grosses, then it gives you the flexibility. If you think about moving different departments or consolidating them in different ways, you can take all of the department gross square footages on a department by department basis, organize them together, and then think about adding a factor for additional square footage to come up with a total building gross square footage. So the reason I'm taking the time to highlight that point is I think when you look at the summaries, sometimes you'll look at it and say, well, this is less square footage than we have now. Well, this is a department gross analysis. When you think about how it translates into a whole building, you apply a grossing factor to come up with a total gross square footage. So hopefully that makes sense. It's defined a little bit more in the report too, but it's a good rationale, I think, to be able to play out different scenarios as you plan for the future to provide good flexibility in terms of how you organize departments within buildings. Okay, so let's, I'm not going to go through every detail of the summary, but at the intro page of of each section for county government and judicial, we have a summary that gives you information on existing staffing. And again, this information changes all the time. I think maybe even with your approved budget, there might have been some additional positions authorized in different groups. So it's amazing how quickly some of this data can get out of date. But what we're really trying to do is think about a long range plan for future staffing. And then on the right side of the screen is how that translates into square footage, department gross square footage for each of the different groups. That allows you to do big picture master planning for how to solve what your various needs are, how to identify what your most pressing needs are from a space standpoint. And then ultimately, you know, if the county moves forward with a new building or a renovation, you dig deeper into that and get into individual level programming for the different departments. So the intent here is to provide the good first pass analysis on the projection and understand where the most pressing needs are from a space standpoint, and then also from a condition standpoint, which I'll talk about a little later in the presentation. So that's the county government side, and then in the green here would be the judicial side. So again, breakdown of each different department and then translation to square footage. There's a couple anomalies I want to point out in the report. When we look at this, we focus on it in a sort of an idealized purpose-built scenario. So one of the challenges right now, especially with the county government functions on this campus, is these buildings were not purpose-built for the functions you have going in here. So what's happened is you've moved different departments in, taken over space, renovated a little bit here and there, but it wasn't like these buildings were originally designed and planned for the most efficient operation for the different departments. The planning that we do assumes more of an optimized scenario. So we start with that, and then, you know, if down the road a determination is made to renovate, we try to look at renovations to better optimize the efficiencies, but then we can make adjustments from there if we're working with existing conditions, because you can't, in this level of planning, you can't play out every scenario yet. It just gives you sort of the baseline so you know how to plan appropriately for the future. But one of the points that's sort of really key with that, before I move on, I'll highlight, is the circuit court clerk, for example. So if you look at the space needs projection for the clerk from existing to future, it's a significant reduction. Now, we are projecting an increase in staffing for the circuit court clerk over time. However, from the time that space was built out to kind of where we are in present day, a lot has changed. Finding more and more that the need for storage of massive amounts of files is continuing to decrease. We see this in a lot of other jurisdictions. This is because of a transition more toward, digital records and that. And frankly, I think what we see in terms of modern office planning, the space for individual personnel is very generous. And I think that, you know, any public entity these days just doesn't have the ability, because of the cost of building space, to build such generous square footage on office space. So when you look at the totals, the percentage increase in space is not very large. It's only 7.3% total. But a lot of that is driven by departments like the clerk, for example, that we see, if done in a modern way, can be greatly reduced on overall square footage and still adequately accommodate the operation. So there's a number of anomalies like that I just kind of want to bring to your attention, so you kind of understand the whole of the process here. So just a couple key takeaways. So for county government, you know, we're projecting about a 33% personnel increase out to the year 2050. And again, this is not intended to be a hiring scenario, but it's based on discussions with the different groups. That's translating to a 7.3% increase in an optimized scenario for department gross square footage. A couple ones I want to highlight. We've had a lot of discussions about just, the continuous implementation of technology and reporting and things. And I think with that in mind, we saw that there was a bigger focus on the need for information technology and how important that's going to be. And the county's done a great job of consolidating those functions into a core group. And I think that's a key driver for future needs for that department. Health department's another one. We've made a projection. I know going back in history, there's been a lot of transition with the health department here at Kane in terms of the depth of services being provided. So we're making an initial assessment on space projections for the health department. This is one that I think could vary quite a bit in the future and that we want to kind of keep a focus on in future planning. Certainly, there's a lot of other counties, and I think in the state of Illinois in general, there's more and more focus on issues of mental health and other supportive things. And some counties have opted to take that on a little bit more internally and build out a little bit more focus around that. Some have not. So the reason I'm just highlighting that is I think whenever you do long range planning, you always want to kind of think about those things. So fast forwarding a little bit, we know that the health department building in Aurora is in really poor condition. And so if you're thinking about new facilities, it's always a good time to revisit. Is there any adjustment in the operations that might go into play? And do you want to be thinking about a facility that has expansion capability or is built a little bit larger? So that's one that I think is of particular importance and what we're saying on the county government side. So again, the other key thing is big adjustments. Most of the facilities for county government were not purpose built for their function. So there's a lot of different scenarios for optimizing efficiency, not only in terms of space usage, but in terms of co-locating and adjacency of groups to provide better efficiencies for staff. And maybe probably more important is ease of wayfinding and so forth for the public. On the judicial side of the house, we're projecting about a 13% total personnel increase out to 2050. One of the key drivers is number of judges, which translates into number of courtrooms and therefore all the agency office groups, state's attorney, public defender, and so forth that support the courtrooms. So this is one where the change in the CMAP population projection changed what we're looking at for judge projections. So a lot of things go into that, but there are some clear ties between population and number of judges. There's some legislative components to that. I think in the prior CMAP projection, we were looking at upwards of 39 judges. Now that's been reduced back to 35. Certainly, we're also looking at things like new case filings and so forth, and case filings have gone down in a number of areas, but we're also finding that the time to dispose of cases has gone up a little bit. There's a greater focus on more problem-solving type approaches and just a little bit more time to kind of work through different cases, and I think that's going to be a continuing trend in the future. Right now, we're still looking at a 1-to-1 ratio of judges to courtrooms. We've talked to a number of different court jurisdictions, and in some instances, they've been able to reduce that ratio a little bit. I think a lot of it comes down to having space available when you need it. So I think that's another area that we'll keep an eye on in the future in terms of how do you actually implement something. But I think it's best to be conservative right now and look at a 1-to-1 correspondence just to make sure you've got that capability. The other thing is we're looking at pretty traditional courtrooms for the planning now. But I will say that there was great dialogue in the interviews and that with the current chief judge about the ability to use some fresh thinking. I think the pandemic has opened up some nice opportunities if you can find a silver lining in there somewhere of use of technology in the courtroom, and whether there's a continued use for hybrid court proceedings and so forth, that can change a little bit the dynamics of a courtroom. And certainly the current chief judge, I think, has a very strong willingness to explore, some different ways of conducting business, I'll say. So that's good. I'd like to see that we can continue to refine that in future planning. The other thing is there's certainly some very significant immediate space need issues relative to the agency offices. Those that have been on the board for some time know that the Judicial Center was planned to have some expansion over time, and there really hasn't been any since it's been built. So it's just been a situation of as staff get hired, they just, keep packing them into the same space that's there. We've done actually a couple projects recently to try to refine the space in the judicial center to make best use of it. Just completed the orders of protection courtroom and tried to find efficiency there to accommodate grand jury proceedings as well. So just trying to find the best options we can with the current space until something more significant can be done. But that's something that's going to be important. I think, all the spaces are just, running out of area. I'll talk later here about we're working on the orders of protection office space and court recording. So again, taking over some space and just optimizing the use of it within the existing confines of the building. And then I already talked a little bit about the circuit clerk issue of being able to optimize there. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears now into the physical condition side of things. And I won't dive too deep into this, but we did various levels of assessment of the building, some more of a general assessment, like at this campus, identifying kind of the high level issues, and then a deeper assessment at the Judicial Center campus, really trying to focus on how best to keep investing good capital dollars to maintain those assets long term. So this is a summary of the areas that we looked at. The result of that is we identified your highest priority assets, which really are the buildings at the Judicial Center campus and a couple others. We developed a plan for capital maintenance expenditure over 5 years. And I think that's been presented previously around budget time as kind of a placeholder for allocations of spending each year. And I think this has given building management group a nice tool to look at issues and adapt and modify in terms of how dollars are spent to maintain your best assets at their highest potential. So I'm going to just quickly run through each of the different campus areas to give you a sense of sort of what we're seeing and kind of what's key in terms of future planning. So as I said, the Judicial Center campus really is a group of very focused purpose-built buildings, all of which have a really good long-term useful life and have the ability to expand and support needs in the future. So this is where we've identified these buildings as the assets you really want to continue to make your best investments in for maintenance so that you can ensure that they, stay a good working asset for the long term. The Judicial Center itself, that was planned to have expansion, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that could happen. But the idea was to continue to consolidate the most critical operations there for efficiencies on security and operations and that. So there's a lot of potential on this site to keep making that happen. And I've really only shown in this graphic the property that the county owns on the southern part of 38. On the northern part, there's additional property, and I think that's up for some further discussion down the road as well. But something not to lose sight of is a property asset that could help to support space needs. So the Third Street Courthouse site, this is kind of an anchor here in Geneva and the focus of courts there. There's been consideration over the years. We've been working with the county about, how much to keep focus on this property. I think the building is a very solid building. It's a beautiful building, and there's a lot of good capability, I think, for the long term there. One of the challenges, though, when you look at courts now that have juries and that, this building is a little bit difficult to reconfigure. It's difficult to optimize for modern day courts, having been built so many years ago. So one of the suggestions we've made is to think about taking some of the more intensive juried courtrooms out of this building and move them to the Judicial Center as a potential. What that would do is take a little pressure off the building and may even free up some space for some of the supportive offices and other functions within the building. It makes it a little bit easier to accommodate technology and the like. So just some things to think about with continued use of the Third Street Courthouse site. Then on the property, there's also the Children's Advocacy Center, which is in good shape, the new Children's Advocacy Center. And then the court annex itself, that building we've identified as a really poor condition asset. It's one that, I would not recommend making any further investments in, and so this is kind of where we're doing that assessment of where do you put your money to best use and where do you say it's time to step away from an asset. It's served its purpose, but it's time to move on. So a good site. The one challenge here is, you don't have a lot of site area. I think trying to do any kind of major expansion here is a little bit tricky. You know, you deal with parking issues in that, but again, this is a strong site asset for the county long-term. Okay, so now to this campus, the government campus. You know, I think a little bit different than what we see at the Judicial Center campus. The biggest driver there is a true need for additional space. The condition of the buildings are good, but it's really about running out of space. A little bit differently here on this campus, a lot of these buildings we would kind of classify as fair to poor condition. Just over the many years, I mean, they're certainly serving their purpose, but there's a number of issues with the site that I think most of us know here, issues with accessibility. I mean, a lot of these buildings were built in a time when the codes were a little bit different. I think, you know, just being able to get the accessible approach, accessible bathrooms, to be able to do, you know, more efficient security, and that is just challenging because you've got a mix of different buildings. And I mean, those that work on this campus day to day experience it all the time. But I know in even the meetings I'm out here, probably every time I'm out here, I see somebody from the public coming into some building and asking for a department, and they're told, well, no, that's actually in the other building over here. And, you know, it's difficult, I think, for the public. A lot of people don't exactly understand which department they need to go to at times. And even with the signage, you've done a nice job of doing as much signage as you can. It's just difficult for people to understand where to go sometimes. So I think a lot of the challenges with this campus are driven much more by condition, not being purpose-built, not having the efficiencies of spaces adjacent to each other. I mean, if you can accommodate public servicing operations like supervisor of assessments or treasurer or the clerk, where people come there on a regular basis, if they're consolidated together, it just makes it so much easier for the public. Because then if they think they're supposed to see the clerk, but it's really the supervisor of assessments, it's a matter of just walking 10 feet to a different location rather than, you know, wandering the site for a little bit to find a different building. So, I mean, those are kind of the biggest takeaways here. Certainly there's a couple buildings that, you know, you've kind of pulled away from that I certainly wouldn't plan to put a lot of additional money into. But again, I think the biggest issue here is a lot of grade slope, a lot of accessibility issues, and just long-term, you know, requirements for maintenance of older buildings. Okay, so another kind of key site is the Kane Branch Court site. You know, over the years, there's been a reasonable amount of investment made into this building. I think the county originally was leasing it at one point and then acquired it some years back, but serves a nice purpose for the branch court. The diagnostic center is a little bit newer build out there. You know, I think long-term, there's an objective to move the circuit court clerk in with the rest of the court functions just for operational efficiency. So I think that's something to consider. Perhaps there's, you know, certainly in that case, there's an ability to optimize the square footage, which we talked about. But the site is a good geographic location in the county. It's got a lot of parking. So certainly something that should be considered as to what's the best continued or reuse of this building is part of the overall master planning for the future. Okay, so Fabian Parkway campus. So we're underway right now with working on demolition of unused assets out there. It's another site that's got really nice frontage on Fabian Parkway, great geographic location in the county. There's a handful of assets that are being maintained out there, the communications tower, storage. You've got your recycling center out there right now. But this is a kind of more of an opportunity asset, I'll say, something to look at. And, you know, is the older buildings that have sort of outlived their useful life are removed, you've got a nice piece of property that has potential for solving future needs. So something definitely to keep in consideration as you think about the long-term needs for the county. And then last, I just want to touch on the satellite location. So, you know, a lot of times when we're doing these studies, we give a lot of consideration to, you know, is it best to consolidate all functions into one geographic location? Are there reasons to have satellite presence? And I would say in the instance of Kane County, knowing that you've got major population centers in Aurora, the Tri-Cities area, and then up in Elgin, There's a lot of direct, I'll say, client servicing potential by having satellite assets. I mean, certainly on the judicial side, you've got the branch courts, health department, kind of having those services where your constituent base can best utilize them in the Aurora area for direct service. Same is true for court services. When you think about probation, if you can set up a satellite location that allows for court services probation to be close to where the clients are, it's just a little bit easier to kind of manage that process instead of, hoping that people can find public transit and so forth to come to a centralized campus. So I would say that maintaining some core functionality of satellite uses is important for servicing the constituents effectively. And I know there's other outposts of the clerk. And as you think about these things of bringing sort of specialized or just key customer service components to constituents where they live, that's a big benefit. Unfortunately, in Aurora, in this case, these two assets are both in what I would call fair to poor condition. They're working. They're just not ideal. There's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done. In the case of the court services, it's really tight. But there's interesting synergy. I mean, you think about, especially if you were to think about different avenues with, mental health in the future, and I'm not necessarily recommending that, but if that's a mode to go to, and you think about maybe somebody who's on probation and a different level of support and ties to mental health care and that, there's some nice synergies there. So having functions close to each other or co-located in some capacity, I think is something to keep an eye on. It's just unfortunate that, you've got property in this location, but the assets themselves are not in good condition. So again, just to quickly summarize, we've tried to break the building and property assets down into a couple categories. So what we call priority assets, all the components on the judicial center site, the Third Street Courthouse itself, the Children's Advocacy, buildings that were purpose-built or of high quality, would be very costly to replace and are serving the needs well for the future, are the type of assets you want to continue to invest maintenance dollars in. Secondary assets is where I would kind of classify the buildings on this campus where, consider what's the best approach for the future and what's the right timing for that, but look at more stabilizing investment. I wouldn't necessarily recommend a massive investment into buildings on this campus until you're certain about, is it best to stay here, rework things here, move somewhere different? So just kind of prioritizing the level of investment. And I put health department and court services on the secondary list, mostly because they're a necessary asset right now. And again, I would just sort of stabilize until there's a better decision made for how to address those needs in the future. And then I've got the poor building assets, court annex, a couple buildings on the campus here, and then the opportunity assets of the branch court facility, because it's just got a lot going for it, whether it's for additional county use or some sort of divestiture. I think that's kind of to be determined. And then certainly the Fabian Parkway site, as I talked about, is a really nice property asset that could serve the county's needs well in the future. So I think I talked about a lot of this through the process, but regular maintenance investment through the 5-year capital investment plan or capital maintenance plan on your priority assets, and then stabilizing sort of these other assets until better decisions can be made about where to go with the information we have so far. The importance of the satellites, I would not really recommend stepping away from that. I think that that's an important constituent service and client service component that really needs to be part of the long range operational plan. And the departments that have those satellite locations were pretty clear on that. One other thing I'll mention, there's a couple assets that are being leased to support needs. So like the Regional Office of Education, Community Reinvestment. I think those are working well. I wouldn't mess up a good thing. I'll say it's working out okay, unless there's an issue with a lease that comes around or something. And in the report, I think we identified that there's a potential maybe to optimize some square footage with the Regional Office of Education, but I certainly wouldn't make that any kind of a high priority tactic right now. I'd focus on your own personal direct county assets and the more pressing needs of the county. So what does that all mean then? So, we've developed a ton of data. We've got some, I think, good projections now for consideration. We've done the assessment of properties. I think the key now is to kind of take a two-pronged approach for the county on how to move forward. Looking at a long-range plan, I mean, I think it's tough sometimes to think about the long range, but county's not going anywhere. So, we need to be thinking about, what's the right place to be out to the year 2050. And, it's hard to make a perfect projection for 30 years out, but the intent of trying to look at that kind of a time horizon is any project you look at is going to take several years to accomplish, sometimes decades. We've been doing planning work for Kane County for many years and see how you kind of have to methodically work your way through a plan. It's always about trying to find the right alignment with dollars that are available. You may identify a preferred solution that you can't implement for, pick a number, 8 years, because that there has to be kind of a funding ramp up that sets you up to be able to accomplish a bigger project. So I think it's always important to have a really clear vision of what's the optimal solution for the future, but we also know that there's some really pressing short-term needs. So I always like to think about, how can you accomplish short-term solutions, but do it with a focused approach toward what makes sense for the long term. So I think some of the changes that are being made at the Judicial Center right now are thoughtful solutions, things that need to be done, but are addressing short-term solutions, and it's done in the right building because we know the county's not going to step away from that building asset. It'd be too expensive to replace, and it serves your purpose really well. So that's kind of what I mean when you think about master planning from here, that you want to think about, what are the best ways to solve some of the short-term challenges with an eye toward the future. So you don't get yourself into a situation where you solve something short-term, put a bunch of money into something that's not the best operational approach. Sometimes it's hard. You have to just do what you need to do sometimes, but I've seen some other counties that we've worked with that have not kind of had the clear vision of the long range future and have invested significant sums of money into a project, only to find out 10 years later that they were going in the wrong direction. And then, then that becomes sort of wasted investment. So that's why.
Jason, just to interject for
Sorry.
a moment on that point, if I could.
Well, I'd like to have him finish first before if that's
It'll
possible.
be quick. It's right on the stuff he was just talking about.
Okay,
Promise.
make it fast.
Yeah. To that point, your list of secondary properties, those made it to that list because of use and activity. But what you're describing right now is that be careful how you consider those, even though they're on that secondary list.
That's what he already said. Yep.
Just, I wanted to clarify
Thank you.
that
Thank you.
that was it.
Okay, well, and let's put enough time afterwards. Make notes too, so we can bring them up again.
Yeah, I'm on my last slide, so
All right.
I'll be happy to answer questions after this. So I, that's sort of the work we've done now is foundational in terms of understanding where your biggest challenges are, what challenges you have from a space need standpoint, condition standpoint, and I think gives you all the ingredients, I'll say, to come up with a really good long range plan for the future. The other big piece of this is, I mean, you need the buy-in and support from all the key stakeholders to make sure that you can move forward with a plan that everybody's committed to. So, we think about that by doing workshops, and I think we've identified what some of the key priorities are, but everyone will have a little bit different take on what's the highest priority and where to start first. So what we like to do is, sort of lay out all the different things. We'll give you our recommendations as architects and planners on what we're seeing. But then again, I think it's important to get, all the input and support from stakeholders to make sure you've got consensus around what are your most pressing issues and where do you want to focus for the future? And then, how do you fund it? I mean, it doesn't do any good to, have a book, master plan book sitting on a shelf that nobody can do anything with. I mean, you have to look at these projects and we can, in the next stage, we provide solutions, cost data, schedule considerations so that you can then take action and implement projects and implement solutions to these needs. So that's the wrap up. I know I've been talking for a long time, but I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Okay, hopefully you got a lot of notes together here. Now, you raised your hand early. Did you get your questions answered?
No, not
Okay.
that one.
And anything else, Mr. Davis, to follow up on that thing?
Uh,
No. Okay,
And Jason was in the middle of saying it. It was just, for me, it was one of those moments that clarification or repeating it was something I wanted
Got it.
everybody to
Good job.
hear.
Juby, back.
Okay, so thank you. I had a ton of questions coming into it and you answered all but 1.5-ish. So when you were doing your metric.
Make sure your
on
microphone is, you're up, up your microphone, please.
Hearing it, so I'm sorry. Is that okay now?
Yeah.
Okay,
a little better.
so when you did your metric for your assessment of your building qualities, I saw everything that went into that, but I'm just curious why you have building G at the at this campus as a 1.7, but you have it as a secondary. Is that because that's the Pope Cole House and because it's the yellow house?
G's the yellow house.
So it
Yeah,
is a couple, okay.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between that 1.7 being on the maybe save list and the 1.7 being on the kick it out list?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we try to evaluate based on the quality of a, not just from a pure condition standpoint, but if there's historical significance.
Which
in
there
that.
is.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that's why we're putting that one into a different category there.
Okay.
And I think it's being used in a decent way. It's not a purpose-built facility, but, even kind of wherever the county decides how to address this campus, we try to give consideration to things that have a little bit more significance to them,
Okay.
just based, not just purely on a physical
So
condition.
it's not a strict, when you're doing your metric, it's not, there's always that little bit of wiggle room where
Yep.
maybe something has importance. And that also played into your thing with the Third Street Courthouse.
Correct.
I figured it did. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I do it? Okay, Mr. Linder?
I'm going to ask you to do some guessing here. But if we go through all of the assessments and planning and so forth, we determine that we want to move out of this building and build something new and some magical space somewhere. Can you give me a range of a timeline in your experience as to when moving day might be?
Yeah, there's a,
And I'm getting at some kind of updated maintenance stuff that needs to be done here, and whether we should be doing some of that. Because I'm saying 7 to 10 years.
well, so I think the reason it's a pretty straightforward question. It's difficult to answer.
Yeah.
Why it's difficult to answer. I think if we knew that there was a decision made about where to go, and there was money available, it's easy to answer. The tricky part here is, you have to get past those first two hurdles before you can make that decision. Is there consensus that moving to a new location is the right thing, or do we want to renovate and expand everything different on this campus? And then, I'm just going to make up a number. I hesitate to even do this, but I'll make up a number that doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's say it's a $10 million investment. Okay. Whatever that investment dollar value is, you have to then sort of figure out the ramp up time and how to put the money together, whether it's 10 million, 100 million, pick a number. You have to, figure out that ramp up, and, that might take 5 years. Maybe there's a scenario in play where, you can do something sooner, but that's why it's hard to answer that question, because you have to tie the funding reality.
So
to
my
it.
7 to 10 years was optimistic, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't want to pour cold water on it, but I think that you do have to look at the financial side, and that's something that we have not yet had a great conversation on in terms of how to fund a project, yet. So that has to be answered before you can do it. I mean, if it's just designing and build a building, you could maybe do that in 3 years, if everything is lined out right, but the ramp up time to get there is what adjusts things.
Okay. Thank you.
So if we don't start somewhere, we won't start anywhere.
Mr. Chairman.
Part of it, though. I had Mr. Davis that was asking a question, and was it Mr. Ford?
Yes, sir.
I guess it may be more of a comment that, and Jason has been before us many times, going back many years. And to your point, even more than money, it starts right here in this room with the will of the board to pull the trigger on, confronting the idea that this building was never built for this purpose and it's time to move on. We've come very close to that. That idea has gotten a lot of traction more than once with more than one configuration of this board. But we never quite got over the top. And then you have to start back over, push that boulder back up again. So the number one hurdle is simply the political will of this board to act, to decide that, yes, it really is time to go on. We've had a series of master plans, most of them, I think, done by White and Company, and we just could never get there. So your 7-year plan is, I mean, I think Jason would agree that if we said yes, if we voted and had a solid yes, we're going to do this and we're working on the funding and we'll explore P3 possibilities and whatever else you give to us to do, it could happen in that time frame. But it starts by first us looking at it and going, this has been a great run here. This is not the home for us. We need to move on.
I know it's not my turn, but to interject right here, I just came from one of the washrooms in this building that has a toilet that doesn't flush. And there's an existing bathtub with a piece of plywood caulked and painted it over the top of it.
Well, okay, I'm going to stop you there then. We're all familiar with that kind of stuff. So I think that is a value point. We're starting here. This is giving us a base to start and go forward on that. So we're pretty familiar. I appreciate the comment and the input, but yeah. And then Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I was going to say mostly what just been said. That the timeline is really based on us here now. And I know all this is about money, so at the end, but I don't think we need to focus so much on the money in the beginning. We need to focus on what is our next step and get through it and get committed to it. And this board is going to change. This whole dynamic will change. If we get it set up to a point where it's in process, it will keep going. And I think that's what we need to do is figure out what is our next 2, 3, 4 steps, next 3 steps, and go after them.
Good point. And we have seen that we can make progress because I know I was on this committee 4 years ago when we first started, and we now have a multi-purpose building. So we can make progress on that. And Madam Bates.
Mr. Chairman, I always feel like I am the brakes on this freight train because
Are you going to get into what this building is to us here?
no, I'm going to get into what it would cost truly to build another building. One figure was 10 million. The other figure was 100 million.
That was just
Okay.
Okay.
All right. How many generations will it take to pay off a new building? And as our gentleman said here, this building is performing the function that it was intended to use. Maybe not as slick as some new buildings would, but let's make sure we're not taxing our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren because we think we don't like, because a bathroom needs to be remodeled.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you. Yeah, I didn't mean to, your point is very well taken. That's something that we can all agree on. We need to have all of the figures, and that's why we're starting with this basic program here and all of the study that's necessary to make those informed decisions, not necessarily all on emotion, but even as Jason said, we don't even put the buildings into a category
Right on.
specifically by the numbers.
Mhm.
So we were going to take that into a point. Anybody else on the committee have anything else that they want before?
I have.
Don't look.
Not on the committee.
Okay, well, I have Madam Chair's hand up first,
Yeah,
and then
that's-
you,
okay.
Bill. Fine.
All right, thank you.
Great.
I've been thinking about this presentation and I've been talking, as you all know, at great depth about learning about the uses of this building and the other related buildings to the county. And I came up with a saying for myself, and I don't know if you want to reflect on that as well, to Mavis's Bates' point and to everybody else's concerns and the historic significance of some of the buildings. We have several of them that we own are historically important. How they're going to be used is yet to be determined for the future. But to taxpayers' money, the stewardship of taxpayers' money, it's in my opinion, that we should not be serving the buildings. The judicial area, the courts, the multipurpose building we are not serving the buildings. The buildings are serving our constituents, serving the needs of the county. These particular buildings here, we are serving them. Taxpayers' money are serving for a purpose of, because they're here, because they exist, because they're not serving our community members. When we have an opportunity and not adequate parking, I'm almost done, adequate parking, not access, confusion for wayfinding, deteriorating conditions, we are not serving the community. We are serving the building because we have a romantic relationship with what this building may have been in a distant past or because it exists.
Again, then we'll go back to, we don't always
Well put.
go by the numbers, but, and so we don't want to get too far afield in that kind of thing, because we are want to make progress to the future.
Roth here. I'm not on the committee, but I had some thoughts. It was a good report. But nothing was mentioned about work from home. I mean, the pandemic kind of showed that's a paradigm shift. Given as an example, Allstate sold their entire property because they said 95% of their people can work from home. Now, the reality is, I doubt we can have sheriffs working from home as an example. But it's also related, work from home is identifying, because that also helps for employee retention.
Much more loyal.
Yeah, so it's not an easy answer, but it's something I think should go into part of it. That's all.
That was just one point. Okay, great.
And I would disagree with that according to latest
I
study.
don't want to have arguments, but
I would maybe just to that point, that discussion came up with all the different interviews we had with the different departments. And I think that a number of departments, felt there was some consideration for some hybrid work and various things. And I think certainly during the pandemic, there was a need for some of those functions. By and large, though, I think that most all the groups felt like having the core of capability to have staff adjacent. So what's difficult with that is, we're trying to look at things for 30 years out, and a lot of times the pendulum will swing a little bit here and there. So we're trying to find efficiencies where we can, but not be in a situation where you've designed something for a present day state that changes down the road. So it's definitely something that we talked about and something we're thinking about and will be considered in the future. I think a lot of those changed work styles are things to always keep an eye on. I referenced the courts as an example of that, where, and again, this could swing back and it's hard to tell exactly what will happen, and it's guided by legislation and state Supreme Court and so forth. But use of specific technology in that, if there's ways to find efficiency, that's something that we keep an eye on, and we would say would definitely be part of any future discussions.
okay. We're going to start.
On
gonna
that
wrap it.
point.
She had her hand up first, but
Yeah, okay.
okay, and then, but we're going to be moving.
Have we done energy audits on these buildings for energy efficiency?
Yeah, there's been other audits done. I think there's been some assessments on lighting replacements and that, and grant opportunities. So that's a sort of a little bit of a separate parallel path. And actually a number of the things that came out of the maintenance plan looked at some opportunities to do some upgrades that were with an eye toward much more energy efficiency.
And then. Mr.
Just a
Gattis.
quick follow-up on the hybrid of, work from home and so forth. And I think it was a recent article in, I want to say in Cranes, that reminded everyone that while much more time is spent being able to work from home, that didn't eliminate some time spent or the need for an office space to still go to for the function. So you couldn't really just design that space out while they're going to work from home. They're not always at home or on the road. There's still a space requirement.
As per
Yeah.
Mr. Dwyer's comment that it's hard to
Yeah.
pin that thing down.
Uh,
Yes,
This
Mr.
is-
Fonstock.
Roger Fonstock. So just one thing to keep in mind, after the pandemic and the time we spent providing computer equipment to everyone to do the work from home, we have, expanded our footprint of computer equipment by probably 30-40%. And all of that equipment is aging every day and every year. I will tell you that all the equipment that they use to take home, nobody brought us equipment to turn in from the office. So everybody kept what they had in the offices. They still report to the offices, but they also have the ability to work from home. So we've never really done a strictly work from home. And I think we've talked about it as a pilot. Maybe that's something we could test out with a group of people. And I think that would be a good exercise. But I don't know that it's a windfall, for us. It's just something we need to look at and experiment with. Also requires the county to probably reconsider a lot of their employment practices and their policies. So I know when we went into the pandemic, there were a lot of things, there's gaps about how do you handle overtime, or how do you handle the types of work and things that are required when people are out of sight, out of mind. And it's something that I think during the pandemic was a little loose and free, just like the board meetings, you can attend remotely, you can do all of this. And then when the rules kick in and you have to define what it is, it starts to put constraints in place. And we are government, we're not private money or private businesses. So I think that puts another twist in there of people's expectations.
So again, I think this is a good first step for everything. We've been going about an hour on this and your
Ms.
presentation,
Gums
I
has
appreciate
her
it.
hand up if you want to
Oh.
recognize her.
And then one question on a different note, different
Okay,
topic.
let's give Ms. Gums a chance here first.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really quick, thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of information to digest. Your conversations are very interesting. However, there is one thing that sticks in my craw a little bit, and that is, regardless of what direction we go, we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. I know that's kind of on the back burner for some folks, but if we're forward thinking, for me personally, if I need a new roof on my house, I'm going to have to figure out how to pay for that. Because I can't pay for it now, but I can pay for it next year. So when we're forward thinking, we have to also consider those issues. And we haven't done that, in my opinion. So let's not put that on the back burner. Let's consider that as well. Regardless of what direction we end up going in, we're going to have to pay for that. And that should be very thoughtful.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, we'll think
Mhm.
about it a lot. We're going to discuss it, Mr. Davis.
This one may be a bit specific, but as we're looking at space requirements and the assessments of buildings, where the ROE is, do we lease that entire building? Is that whole building
No,
under lease, or only
it's a floor.
just a floor? All right, because in my
2 or 3. Yeah, there's a lot to that
in
building.
brain, I have some recollection that our obligation to them is like an office for the director and one support staff or something. It's pretty modest. So I just wondered if we're like exceeding that by leaps and bounds, and shouldn't.
They
be.
pay for their own?
There was an agreement to pay a certain amount of the lease in exchange for like operating and other costs. I think we could go back and look at the original
Oh,
agreement.
I'll
but
let you
yeah, I
guys
remember.
hash that out on the side there. And
It's pretty, yeah.
okay, Madam Bates.
Has there been any study done about renovating this building? Are we anywhere with that idea of what, taking out the bathtubs or doing making it more accessible, or doing something where all the public access would be done in one space, maybe over at what's Jack? Cunningham, the county
Clerk's.
clerk's office, which has a big lobby with many windows or something like that. Has there been any study of that?
Okay, well, okay, we'll go into this a little bit here. This is again,
Okay.
kind of a specific thing. So if you want to touch on it, so
Yeah,
everybody's
just
benefit
the
here.
short answer is no, but the county spent time with an architect about 2 years ago looking at just accessibility issues because of some complaints that were raised. And we addressed a couple of things, but for the large part, the capital expense to renovate to meet the code, once you start tearing up structural things, becomes pretty aggressive. You'd have to fund quite a bit of renovation.
Exponential kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then we're going to wrap this up here. I'll give Madam Chair maybe the last little bit of, as long as you don't introduce
Thank
anything
you.
new, I think I can let
Since
that happen.
I'm one of the only board members here who actually works in this building and day to day.
Oh, excuse
so-
me.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's the task. But I'm just sharing a reflection of what Mavis Bates is discussing about environmental issues. the generator that's right behind us is run by diesel fuel. And when it kicks on, and it does kick on from time to time, the admin offices are right directly adjacent to it. So if the wind is going in a certain direction, which it often is, the diesel fuel, the fumes, which are toxic to breathe in, are permeating all of our offices. So environmentally, it's an issue.
That's an issue. Thank you.
Just-
That's
just
enough
one-
of that.
just-
Okay, Mr. Ford?
And mine is outside of, not, I shouldn't say outsiders, but I just want to know
Overview thing?
overview, yes, and that is, what are our next steps? And how soon can we get to how can we line those up? What are they?
Okay.
And then how do we put them in play?
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer to that. That's why we have a committee here. Hopefully, we can get this information and use this study to give us some discussion points for the committee to get together individually or input from anyone, especially with Roger Fonstock on where we want to go with this thing. So you have a
Sure.
pinpoint on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Roger Fonsack. So from this point, we're basically accepting this as the final report from the space needs assessment. And then from this, just as Mr. Dwyer said, we would be going into a facility master planning process to determine what you do with all of this information. And also you have the elected officials, department heads, maybe the public. How do you go about a process of planning for that and do it in a way in which you could present that information back to the board to adopt the plan, try to look at funding measures, how to fund the plan. And there's no preconceived notions. It's what would come from that would be the collective ideas of the board. I think the elected officials, departments, and then you do have the public. So I can see that in a planning process that would take a period of time. Maybe it takes us months to a year, hopefully not that long, but I think we need to get a planning document though that can also be worked on and executed. Maybe it's phases of a planning document and incremental. When you're talking about funding, just put it kind of in your mind. I mean, for $50 million worth of buildings, let's say for 20 years, you're going to spend $6 or $7 million a year to fund that. And if you need $150 million worth of buildings, multiply by 3. So, I mean, that's the kind of money that is required to fund these types of buildings. So I think that, at one time in the planning process, maybe 2014, they had gotten up to somewhere just south of $100 million. And that was mostly on the Judicial Center campus. So those are the kinds of numbers that come out. I mean, you can deal with smaller incremental steps, but the larger master plan and larger buildings are a substantial investment. And I think, from that planning process, you'll want to make sure that you understand the finances and what you have to do to get to that point. So that's the next year. I think that's the next, 6 months to a year of planning.
And this, I don't know, Madam Chair, this program might be well served to be presented in a committee of the whole so that everyone can hear this. I think it was very valuable to get a really good overview of and that's the design purpose of it, to know where we're starting at from right now. So I don't know if that's.
I think that would be a fantastic conversation, but I would hope that it would be the will of this committee to make a recommendation that we move forward with those considerations, rather than just having the committee of the whole decide. I think there has to be, in my
Well,
opinion.
the committee of the whole doesn't decide anything.
No, I understand that, but it is for general discussion for the entire board. But is it the will of this committee to really have a serious deep dive into it? Because you'll be driving it.
Okay. Well, at some point, we'll want to bring this one out maybe so. Roger.
Mr. Chair, yeah, this is Roger again. Would you want us to put together a scheduled date for the committee of the whole with the board office? We could do that for a presentation. Just make sure we have it
Does
available.
that sound like from our committee? Have this at the committee of the whole and then.
Okay.
At least to inform the rest of the board that this is where we're going. I think it's really important. A lot of I think it's really important that the board understand that we are making progress on this and moving forward. And so that we do come to the point where we have to have a decision by the entire board. They feel like they're a part of it as well.
To that end, should we consider putting on the admin committee agenda, maybe for next month, an action item that would allow us to give a recommendation to move forward. I mean, I think with the multi-use building, ultimately, we did take that mantle and say, we're beginning this process here. We're serious about this. And yes, we're giving our colleagues, the rest of the board, a recommendation
Mhm.
that we want to move forward. Is it take maybe a similar path here?
Do you think we'd have something by that time to do that? Are we premature? Are we talking a year to do this?
I
thing?
guess I'm not sure what we would be recommending. Are we recommending that we move forward with the master planning process? Because we don't, you know, that's a discussion I think we have to have about how we go about engaging, whether it's White or some other contractor in the master planning process. I know we have discussions about that coming up with them. I mean, we did a RFP and selected the architect, engineering and companies that we have now. And then there's this, you know, question, is this something that's a continuing engagement where we allow White to progress into the next steps of that? That was originally, I believe, part of the intention. So
I think
then the second part is whether, you know, that's the decision, I think, that needs to still be made by this committee and then the board ultimately.
Mhm.
I think the beginning of this one looks the same. that
Well, let's
we-
have some
you know,
discussions about what we want to do at the next meeting then, or
Sure.
in the
Mr. Chairman?
meeting soon on that way.
All right.
Mr. Ford?
Thank you. Yeah, Ford, this is Ford, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It has to be, I like the idea of what's been said here is that the push needs to come from this committee, because, you know, we're gonna be behind this. The next step, if it's to come up with RFP, may be not quite the step, but at least to have the discussion on how we're moving forward. And I know we are short on time today, but if next month we can talk about what our next steps will be, and that should be, to me, that's my thought, is that should be our agenda, is the next steps for next month.
I'm all for moving forward, so that's the will of the committee then. And then Madam Bates?
Thank you. I think our next step should be a master plan. And I think the master plan should include the renovation of this building, if it's going to include some plan for a new building. Roger, I appreciate what you said. It would be expensive, but it's not going to be $100 million to put some more ramps in this building. What are the numbers? I'd like to see the numbers.
Point taken. Mr. Tepe, you had your hand up?
I'll let Madam Chair go first.
Well,
Okay, campus.
Oh,
I don't want to get into something just back and forth on
Mr.
any
Chairman.
particular item. I think, like,
Let me-
Mr. Ford, I don't want us to be moving ahead, whatever that.
Mr. Chair,
that takes. Yes,
Okay,
Mr. Tepe.
Tepe here. First off, I want to commend you for encouraging everybody on the board to attend this meeting yesterday. And we had 11 board members here. This meeting's recorded, and I wish that the other 13 board members would take it upon themselves to listen to it, because this presentation was very important. And the other point I want to make is that before we move forward with saying we're going to take this to the committee of the whole, I think this committee needs a more definitive direction as to what it is that it would suggest. Not some master plan or other kind of thing, but a direction in saying we should do such and such a building here, we should do such and such a building here, and we should replace these functions. And I think that can be done within the framework of this committee. And I think that would really help the rest of the board. So,
Okay,
thank you.
and then I'm going to, okay, Juby, make it fast.
I'm sorry. I'll make it as quick as I can. I was under the impression that Mr. Fonstock said that the needs assessment came first, and then the next step would be a facility master plan. And he was unclear whether it was going to be given to White, which was what the original intent was, or whether it was going to go out to RFP. Now I'm hearing all kinds of other things happening there. And if I don't understand what we're asking people to do, I don't know how we can be directing staff what we want them to do. So Roger, we finished our needs assessment and now our next step would be a facility master plan, correct?
That is correct. in
So-
my understanding of it.
So what is this committee asking us to do? We're not doing a facility master plan, we are, or we're looking for the process of how we want to choose? Because if we're looking for how we want to choose who's going to be doing our facility master plan, I'm all over that. We should be doing that. We should decide whether we, no offense, whether we want to go with you, whether we want to do an RFP, you can still apply that way. But I think that actually is our next step, is for us to get, because our recommendation is a facility master plan. And that will give us all of the information that everybody is individually asking for if we do the facility master plan the same way I'm familiar with in other governmental bodies.
That's the next
That-
step.
So,
Okay, well, that's the
That's the
consensus I'm
next
getting at.
step. Yep.
so Mr.
Uh,
Chairman.
Did you have a comment, Mr. Ford, or are you just nodding in affirmation?
Actually, my comment is that's about right. But I didn't think that we were ready to make that decision today. That's why I thought we might need next month to spend more
Well,
time discussing
Exactly,
it.
that
So,
was my point.
yeah,
We'd be talking about it next month
Right.
to figure out,
right,
Yeah.
but we have the consensus, that's where we want to go.
right.
Okay, that's the consensus I'm getting. Then Mr. Fonstock?
I think my only point of a question is that the master planning process, it comes with everybody's kind of, preconceived notions. It doesn't start with just one. So, we would look at it kind of open book. What are our options? What are our, kind of strengths and weaknesses? What do we have to offer? So all of those things considered would hopefully tell you which direction you should go with what buildings. But I would caution coming to that with preconceived ideas about which buildings, serve what purpose, because the idea is that we're going to learn and we would
Good.
grow and try to determine what's best for the county. And the question about whether it's White and Company or another planner would be a question for this committee, because at the time when we did the original competitive process, we had 3 architects that were selected for the county to do work. That was, I believe, 3 years ago or something like that. So I had talked with Chairman Caius just to discuss, what are our interests in just continuing down the path that we're on versus taking another look at this. We've had, a couple of years of time. We're going to be renewing our architect and engineering services. I believe it's either it's next meeting. I think we have it, or so. No, next meeting. I'm sorry. So we're at that point in the contract where we're going to renew for architect engineering services. And then there's this planning process. And the only question I had was, you can continue down the path you're on, or, there is the idea of going out to a request for qualifications and interviewing planners that would come in and help you with the planning process. And I'm not telling you that because I have a desire to do one specific thing over the other, but it's your option. And I think it's probably your duty to look at what's the best planning process for the county. So we're going to be talking about that with Jason, with White, and we're also going to be talking about it with internally, what we think is the best plan. And it may end up being a request for qualifications where we qualify people that can do this type of work, and then we have them come in and maybe we actually even have demonstrations of what they would do in the planning process to help us come up with a plan. But I think that it's important because of the significance of it and the timeliness of it. And, what kind of a product do you get, especially at the end of the day, when that you're going to need to take that to the public for funding? What is your product? What is the purpose of it? What are the benefits? All the different, attributes. I think that's important to understand, and we need to get that straight.
Would we have a point of an action item next meeting, do you think?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I mean, to
Yes,
Roger's
sir, you go
point,
on.
most of that discussion starts at the admin committee.
Yep.
So from today, if we have consensus that we would love for everybody to see what we saw today at a committee of the whole, at the next committee of the whole, by the next time we convene this committee, we're already talking about having some items on our agenda that we can either discuss and or have action.
Have an action.
And that's
plan.
what the beginning of all this looks like. I think then we're moving a little bit.
So is that, members of the committee, does that sound reasonable? then?
Is the
That
action-
We give direction, we're going to be, I'm sorry.
is the action item to create a master plan?
I think
Move
that
forward on a
unless we get some
master
different
plan?
consensus at committee of the whole, I think the idea would be to begin the
That's-
process of, yes, of
Okay.
initiating a master plan.
Mhm.
The committee of the whole may not be scheduled until June.
Well, it
We have
doesn't-
one every month, right?
Already planned.
Okay. All right.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman,
then I think we need to move ahead with whatever
I
we
think
have to
so.
do then.
that's,
Yes, I-
it still sounds like we need to take this discussion to next meeting
Mm.
and then plan everything out
As a discussion or as an action, should we involve an action item
as a
next month?
discussion.
I think you give yourself the option. I mean, you put it on an agenda so that we could
Could
take
an
action.
Does that sound reasonable to you?
But,
Mr.
you
Fox?
don't
I
have
think
to.
you would adopt the assessment report as it's presented
Mhm.
and recommend moving forward with a master planning process.
Because again,
Next step in
even that
that-
action is only a recommendation from our committee.
Yeah.
So it's,
The next step in that would be the decision to either request a proposal from White and Company or one of the architects to do that, or to do an RFQ to qualify architects or engineers
I like
to.
the idea of the RFQ, just to open it up and make sure we get all, like you said, I think it's our responsibility to do that, but is that an action item we want on the next one?
I think so.
I think we need to have the conversation, sorry. I think we need to have the conversation where we're not feeling rushed and everybody's not looking at the clock. So I think it should, because that's what I keep seeing. I keep seeing everybody like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And this
We got
is,
some business here.
this
yeah.
is $100 million decision and it's going to require a lot of buy-in. So I think that if we put it on the agenda for a robust discussion, try to minimize all the other things that are going to be on that agenda. And if we can come to a determination to have an action item, great. But I don't want everybody to feel like they have the
Okay.
pressure to have it be an action item with very little discussion.
Well,
Fine.
but having an option on it doesn't mean we have to act on it though.
Right.
Option, so let's look at it, having an option for the next thing, as some action item. Then before it's great, we're already getting discussion right here in the meeting. Hopefully,
If you want to order pizza, I'll
the
stay.
problem with the trying to keep it down to where we don't have any other business is that we have business. So whatever we decide to do next month is going to be involved with whatever business we have to. So we're going to move right along now and go. Is that clear, Mr. Fonstock? Well,
Yep.
For the next
For
month,
me.
we'll have a potential action item, some sort of a reserved, and we'll have further discussion then and invite everyone to have discussion between now and then amongst ourselves in
Okay.
appropriate group size, which is 2 at a time. And then if it's okay, we're going to move on to item 6, building management and some resolutions. That sound reasonable to the committee?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Then-
Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Great job. Great job.
Yeah.
Jason, yeah. Thank you.
And what I would entertain a motion authorizing a contract extension for lawn and landscape maintenance services for Kane County facilities. Moved by
So moved. Or second.
So moved.
Ford
Davis?
moves to have a second.
Ford and Davis.
Or it's quicker to say than that.
Cut that grass.
So moved. So we'll get that there. Okay. Any discussion or short?
This is a extension of a 2-year contract with Ratliff Landscaping, not to exceed $200,000. It's a budgeted expense for building management. We recommend approval.
Comments, questions for Roger? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums. Ms.
Gums,
Gums.
yes. Sorry, couldn't get that button. Yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Passes.
Motion passes. I would entertain a motion authorizing expenditure of funds for online marketplace and maintenance, repair and operations, MRO supplies and equipment. Moved by Berman, second by
Gums,
Gums.
Okay.
Mr. Ponstock.
This is a resolution with Omnia Partners and the company that we purchase maintenance, repair and operations supplies from is Granger. This is for $300,000 a year, and this is a budgeted expense. There are 2 typographical errors on this. In the second paragraph, the whereas, it should be whereas the Omnia Partners contract. It says whereas he. And then the second one is in the first, now therefore be it resolved. The third line, it reads 500,000 and then parenthetically it has 300. It should be 3 instead of 5,
So
So
3
it's
and 3.
300,000. So I would ask for a motion and a second to make those amendments.
I would ask those that made Mr. Berman and Mr. And Madam Gumbs, would you agree to
Yes.
modify your motion to accept those Scribner's errors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, then let's go ahead then. If there's any other questions, go ahead and vote on it then as modified.
Berman,
yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Comes, yes.
Juby,
UBI.
Caius.
Yes. I guess since we don't have a state's attorney here, I can't have, nobody's gonna question that I did it that way.
It's good.
I'll entertain a motion ratifying an emergency purchase affidavit for HVAC services with One Source Mechanical, moved by Berman, second by Ford.
Okay. This is a resolution ratifying an emergency purchase for heating and air conditioning services with One Source Mechanical not to exceed $400,000. This was done during a month when we were in between the RFP and the actual award of the HVAC contractors. Yesterday at County Board, the HVAC contractors were all approved. So this is housekeeping. We're just trying to make sure that we had paperwork to support the replacement of rooftop units at the health department in an emergency. So we are working on that. I don't know, Henry, are we complete with that yet? They're in process. right?
Project is completed at Rural Health. The night
Okay.
units are on the roof.
So we were just concerned, we're ordering them, we're going to install them, make sure we get the paperwork through the emergency purchase. And then we also had some additional work here at Building C and some other places while we were waiting for the contractors to get approved yesterday. So the amount was $400,000. I don't have the total of what it was, but I think it was considerably less than that for the work that we had done. But anyway, we're recommending the ratification of the emergency purchase affidavit for the One Source Mechanical.
Okay, any questions?
And you did speak to Mo Iqbal, right?
Clear.
I didn't catch that, but we'll just move on. Okay, any other questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Comes, yes.
Juby,
UBI, yes.
Caius.
Yes. I would entertain a motion ratifying an emergency purchase affidavit for plumbing services with Key Construction, moved by Ford, second by
Davis.
Davis.
So this is another emergency purchase affidavit. We were working on the bids for plumbing and redoing all of those at the meeting. In the January meeting, the county board approved of the plumbing contractors. So this dates back to a project before that time, but it was not to exceed $100,000. And this was just to cover all of our paperwork for plumbing needs in buildings while we were waiting for the bids to be approved. So we had asked for $100,000 authorization with Key Construction. Madam Chair signed that, and it's budgeted expenses, but again, it's just trying to cover paperwork between the time that we bid and the time that we contract while we don't have a vendor of record. So we do it by emergency purchase affidavit. So we're recommending approval, and it's a budgeted expense.
And we won't see any more of these now that everybody's.
We've got
approved, right?
both plumbing and HVAC covered now, I believe,
Covered.
fully. So
What else could go wrong? I mean, really, It's this brand new building.
Roofs.
Okay.
electricians.
Question, any questions for,
Mr. Chairman?
okay, yeah, right.
Chairman, what's the knock this seat dollar amount on this again?
So
Two,
this one was $100,000 worth of plumbing work. And I don't have, there's 104 in the estimate from One Source, but yeah, it was 100,000.
this was for Key Construction?
Oops,
100,000?
Sorry, Key Construction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Item
confusing
D.
One Source and
Okay.
Key, yeah,
All right.
100,000 for.
100,000.
Key Construction.
I get it. Okay,
notes
thank
say.
you.
Okay. Then roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davist,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Passes.
Okay, then that takes care of
Buildings.
building management. Then now we're doing information technology. Are you doing that or,
Let me do it. I'll do it. I'll run through them. That's fine
okay,
for now.
you guys decide.
We'll trade off.
Okay,
All right. So we get the first one's GIS. You want to,
oh, I have a motion and a second, increasing the GIS user fee.
Ford moves.
Ford, Berman seconds.
okay. So increasing the GIS user fee is an ordinance that we do a study periodically to determine whether or not we're charging enough for that particular user fee to cover our expenses. So Tom Nikowski, who's the chief of our GIS department, is here with us. Tom had Brad Townsend do this study. And what they came back with is that we were under for our fees. And in the resolution, we're authorizing a new fee of $26. So it's going to go from $20 to $26, $25 of which goes to GIS, and a dollar of that fee goes to the recorder. This is something that funds the GIS department for all the parcel data, maps, aerial imagery, and we're recommending approval of this as this is the only revenue that supports the GIS department.
And it's raised to pay for the services themselves.
Yes.
So Ms. Juby, have your hand up?
Yeah, I just have a procedural question. So the recommendation is for 25 or 26. So how do we?
No, it's 26.
It's 26.
25 will go to GIS and $1 of it goes to the recorder.
So the total would be 26.
Yeah, $26 and $1 goes to the recorder.
Did a dollar previously go to the recorder?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We should approve a rate increase of $5 up to $25 or $6 up to $26. I'm sorry, I'm missing the whole.
Oh, that's in Brad's recommendation. The resolution is for 26.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right, way to go.
He was
Brad.
saying one or the other, but yeah. We only do this about once every 10 years or
I'm
something.
fine.
So,
I'm,
yeah.
it was just,
It
they
does.
didn't mesh
The
with what.
the wording, yeah,
it's the
is
wording. I'm
little
fine with the
confusing.
raising it.
I raise it over. Okay.
It's fine.
Any other questions? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davist,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Passes.
I'd entertain a motion authorizing a fiscal year 2023 budget adjustment to roll over capital budget related to fiscal year 2022
Davis moves.
projects.
Berman second.
Berman.
Okay, so this is a budget adjustment. This is capital that was in the 2022 budget for projects that were started but not completed. It's related to computers and computer software, and it's a total of $238,000. So in this, we need a motion and a second to amend the first fiscal notation where it shows $233,700 cash on hand. That needs to read $238,000 instead of $233,700. It should be $238,000, and that represents the total of the computers and computer software. So
And then I would ask Mr. Davis
Amend my motion to,
to move
Caught that
with
this
that
morning.
modified.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Berman, Davist,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Passes.
all right.
Item C, I would entertain a motion authorizing expenditure of funds for computer hardware, software, and services. Moved by
Ford.
Ford, second by,
Berman.
anybody else new want to get in on this?
Okay.
Roger?
So this is for a contract through Omnia Partners with Insight Public Sector. We buy computer hardware, software, and services for all the offices and departments throughout the county. And it's for $900,000 in budgeted expenses, and we're recommending approval.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Berman, Davist,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Passes.
Item D, authorizing, I'd entertain a motion to authorize Tyler contracts for public safety application. Berman moves, second by
Davis.
Davist. And Mr. Fonstock.
Okay, so this is a contract with Tyler Technologies. They provide the software for our public safety agency, which is the sheriff and the 911 dispatch center. And then there's the subscribers to the 911 dispatch center. I would add that we also support the Forest Preserves public safety component in this as well. It's for $550,000 in maintenance with the 5% increase a year is the maximum thereafter. And I would point out that Tyler has basically gone forward with saying they will not do like multi-year maintenance contracts. They want to go year to year. And that's been a change for us. In the past, we'd asked them for 5-year proposals, and now they're saying they only want to go year to year. So I think that's related to the increasing expenses of their personnel. So, but we're recommending approval. It's a budgeted expense.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davist,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Yes, motion passes. And then on to item 8, Mill Creek SSA, item A.
I move all three of those together since they're all Mill Creek.
I'll entertain a motion to move these 3 together, authorizing contract extension for Mill Creek SSA Parkway Tree Services, authorizing contract extension for Mill Creek SSA Brush Pickup Services, and authorizing a contract extension for Mill Creek SSA Turf Fertilization Weed Control Services, moved by Mr. Davis altogether, and Berman seconds.
So the first extension for Parkway Tree Services is with Henry Tree Company for $20,456.80. That's a 1-year extension, and we're recommending approval of the budget expense for that. The second one is the Mill Creek SSA Brush Pickup Services. It's a 1-year extension with Trees R Us. They do it 3 times a year at $9,968.83 for each pickup. So the total is $29,906.49. It's a budgeted expense with Trees R Us, and we're recommending approval of that one. The last one is SSA Turf Fertilization Weed Control Services. It's another 1-year extension. These are all through purchasing, working with us on extensions of the contracts. This is with True Green Commercial, and it's a total of $18,225. And it's also a budgeted Mill Creek SSA expense.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman.
Yes.
Davist,
Yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
All pass.
On to vehicles, and all of those previous that we've passed, we'll move on to finance. These, I believe, will move to judicial, or no, is that the last one?
9.
We had 3 vehicles,
Yeah,
2,
9A.
I'm sorry,
um,
2 resolutions for vehicles.
Okay, I'll have entertained a motion ratifying an emergency purchase affidavit to purchase 1 vehicle for building management department. Moved by,
Gums.
Davis
move.
moves.
I'm sorry, it was Gums moves. Davis second.
Okay. The vehicle that we were looking to purchase for building management was one that we went through a bid and a state contract and actually looked at local lots. We could not find the Ford 250 cargo van that we had initially spec'd for this. Henry Thompson from our building management office, he found a vehicle that was suitable for their use. They actually requested permission to get an emergency purchase so that we could secure the vehicle at $54,669.26. We worked with purchasing and state's attorney's office to verify that the emergency purchase affidavit would be the responsible thing to do, because we could not buy it through a bid or an existing contract or through any state contract. So they agreed that the emergency purchase affidavit, due to supply chain issues, was probably the most reasonable method of purchase. So we proceeded to purchase the van on emergency purchase affidavit. So this ratifies that purchase.
Okay, any questions or emergency purchases? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davist,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes. And item B, ratifying an emergency purchase affidavit to purchase 3 vehicles for the state's attorney's office and authorizing the associated budget adjustment. Moved by Berman, second by
Davist.
Davist. And this one and the following one will go through judicial. The others go through finance.
Okay.
Once we pass them. Go ahead.
I
Mr.
believe
Fonsack.
this one is on judicial public safety for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So the purchase was for the state's attorney's office. It is from capital for automotive equipment. There is a budget adjustment of $796 to move the money from cash on hand to automotive equipment. They purchased 3 vehicles from Jovic Ford. The total amount, again, $115,796 was something that we worked on with state's attorney purchasing and the state contracts and bids that we can't find supply for. And the best method of purchase was to do an emergency purchase with someone that had inventory. So we're recommending approval of the ratification of this emergency purchase affidavit.
Any questions about this one? Roll call, please.
Berman,
yes.
Davis,
Davist, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Passes.
I will entertain a motion under 10 new business authorizing a lease agreement with the Fox Valley Park District for office space for the King County Sheriff's Office Southern Substation at 3020 West Galena Boulevard, Aurora, Illinois. Berman moves. Ford seconds.
Okay. So the sheriff had passed this off to us for administration committee. This is a lease that he had requested. It's for a space for the substation or satellite office. I think the rate is incredibly favorable, and we've been working with them and the state's attorney's office on terms. In the whereas, you'll see it's $500 per month, and it's just a 12-month lease for that property. This is an expense that the sheriff's office will be paying out of their budget, so we're recommending approval.
Okay, it's right in the middle of the parking or the
And
the
then I think
playground, I
Blackberry,
think, from what I saw from the
the house I think,
overhead,
in
yeah.
the middle of
Okay.
Blackberry Farm.
Perfect. Then any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman, Davis,
Davist, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes. Is there any old business? None? May I have a motion and second to place the reports on file? Berman moves. Second by,
Ford.
Ford.
sorry. Roll call, please.
Berman,
yes.
Davis,
Davist, yes.
Ford, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes. No need for executive session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Davist,
Berman
second.
moves. Davis seconds.
Aye.
Favor?
Aye.
Thank you. See you next.